Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Startup of the Year podcast. I'm John Gaidos, the COO of Established and managing member of Established Ventures and the team behind the Startup of the Year community and this very podcast. Same as last week, I'm filling in as host today for our co-CEO, Frank Gruber. But don't worry, he'll be back hosting again next week. On this episode, we are going to be listening to an interview that Frank did with Blake Hall, the founder and CEO of ID.me. Over the last decade, Blake and his team have turned their startup into a unicorn business while developing a way to simplify and share your identity online securely, which is very important these days, let's all be honest. We'll get a chance to hear some of his experiences as a founder as he talked with Frank at the 9th Annual Startup of the Year Summit, which was presented by ReliaQuest, hosted by Embarc Collective, and powered by Established. Blake was one of our many speakers at the summit, and as mentioned during the last episode, we will be sharing most of those interviews on the podcast over the next few months. So please keep a lookout for those episodes in the future, and hopefully they provide some tips and strategies to some of our listeners and community members. Okay, now let's listen into Frank's chat with Blake Hall.
Thank you, Blake, for being here.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah, and we were just talking. It's a silent dot.
Yeah,
in your name.
ID.me.
Okay. All right. So let's get started here. I know we were talking last night, and we were kind of reminiscing because we've known each other for a long time, and wanted to get kind of your backstory for everyone that doesn't know about how you got into this startup. Your startup journey, right? Like the startup life that's been going on now for over a decade. You can believe it. I don't think I had gray hair when I met you.
I believe that too.
Yeah.
And
I still don't actually. These are summer blondes. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jennifer started her thing in 2010 as well.
Right.
So giving
back to back. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, share a little bit more about how you got started and kind of your early memories of what then was called TroopSwap.
TroopSwap.
Yep.
Yeah. And now when investors kind of are like, man, how did you get here?
Right.
And I'm like, that scene from Die Hard where Bruce Willis has to go across the broken glass? I'm like, that was the last 10 years of my life. So like,
ouch.
Now it's yippee-ki-yay, but I always get really excited when I come back into environments like this because, this was me, 10, 11 years ago. And, so my background, I was an infantry officer, led a reconnaissance platoon, and was going into combat in Iraq in 2006 into Mosul. And there's some 3-letter agencies that said, forget everything that you've learned about reconnaissance and precision engagement. You're going to be running kill capture missions as like a SWAT team. And if you've watched Narcos and kind of killing Pablo Escobar and that stuff, the Atari version of what they were using then, we were using, I'm old now, so I wouldn't say PS5, but like the PS3 version to take down, insurgent leadership in Iraq. So I didn't know it at the time, but got an amazing introduction to identity. And terrorists do things that legitimate people don't do. They swap their SIM cards all the time. They change their phone numbers, their devices. They use voice biometric couriers. And when I went from Baghdad to Harvard Business School, and as
quite a difference. Change. Jeez.
I've got some pictures there too. There was this neighborhood in Baghdad that had standing sewage in the streets, and Al Qaeda had put these bombs in the sewage infrastructure, and these people's life was miserable. And to go from that to Cambridge, Massachusetts was just crazy.
Different, yeah.
That's probably what gives folks PTSD is just like it's literally schizophrenic. But what I learned along the way, and what Jennifer talked a lot about, is that when we first started on this mission set, we weren't very good. Our success rate was like 20%. Theater average success rate was 44%. We kept getting better. We caught the head of the Mujahideen Shura Council for Mosul, the spiritual leader of Al Qaeda for northern Iraq. We became the kill capture force of choice for northern Iraq under Colonel Townsend, who's now General Townsend. Brigade became the Surge Strike Force. We became a division asset in Baghdad. And then the last 2 months, I was running operations for Task Force Night, which is part of Joint Special Operations Command, British SAS operators with my crew. And our success rate was north of 90%. It got to the point where the sergeants in the operations center, they stopped betting on whether or not we would get the target and just how many minutes after we got on site to when we did our job. And so that was just through repetitive learning. It was about getting a little bit better every day. And 13, 14 months into it, we were rocking, like, and really in a groove. And I figured, maybe somewhat naively that I saw that life is short. Did a brief stint.
That's dangerous work. So that's not just like you're making it sound like it was just easy. He just would have did a bunch of stuff, and it was that's really hard work.
It was hard work, and I figured no one would be shooting at me over here, but maybe if I could use the same principles, or I hope not anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you are, I guess. Yeah.
But no, when I did a brief stint at McKinsey, knew that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, and then saw that government agencies and stuff are relying on credit bureaus. But first, to your point, I saw that military families and people couldn't prove their military service to organizations. And so the original idea and concept for what is now ID.me was Troop Swap. It was a military Craigslist, like a trusted version of Craigslist, in the same way that Facebook started with students and kind of grew to mass market. We made 2 pivots along the way, but first I met you and Jen in DC.
Right. So you were just getting out of Harvard, and you were coming down, had this idea. Remember, it was like in 2011, I believe, and you got like a U-Haul or something. You're moving across the country. You're down this coast, and your first thing you went to was like one of our, back in the day, we used to host these events called Tech Cocktail, and you rolled in and connected with us, and pretty much the rest is history. That was it. That was the beginning and the end. So, end of story. No,
Frank,
that was it. No,
$3 billion.
Right, exactly. Immediately, it skyrocketed. Let's talk about it. So you literally were. That story is kind of interesting because now you are at this point. So you were bootstrapped. You had this idea, and you really kind of shows that you were basically trying to figure it out with how much in your bank account trying to make this work.
I turned down like a $250,000 salary from McKinsey, paid back a $25,000 signing bonus. I'd raised $100,000 from a classmate, and then David Tisch, who's the first managing director of Techstars New York.
Yep.
And the first sale I made was to some of my rugby buddies from business school, where I was like, "Can I sleep on your couch?" Like, I'm probably the only homeless Harvard Business School graduate in the country. And some of the same conversations I had with myself at Ranger School. It was like, dude,
you can do this.
The New York Yankees of consulting and making $250,000, and instead paying myself like $40,000 a year and like literally homeless, like with these poor guys and sleeping on the couch. And eventually got to a moment where I only had $10,000 left in my bank account, but I figured it was either all in or quit. And so I knew that DC would be the right place for us, given the importance of government and identity, and signed a $50,000 lease on a house in Swan Street near DuPont Circle in DC with $10,000 in my account. Put a U-Haul behind my pickup truck, drove down I-95 from Boston to DC, literally got into town, threw a mattress on the bed of the house, and then went around the corner to a Tech Cocktail event and met you and
bunch
Jen.
of people. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't joking. The rest is history. And then you basically had this idea that was Craigslist, and you pivoted to, how did you get to cybersecurity? Like, what was that like, and what was that journey? Because you've kind of meandered to get there, and now you have a deal with like the IRS. You're really growing. So
yeah, I mean, now 70 million users. We'll have 100 million Americans enrolled by the end of tax season, and
a lot.
It's like 40% of American adults.
Wow.
Over half of California is enrolled, and so
that's
I think Peter Thiel kind of talked about this too. Like, a startup is about finding a secret that nobody else knows about that serves a need, and then the hard part is like, well, how do you shoot the gap, right? Like, we all probably knew that taxi cabs needed to be disrupted, but it was Travis Kalanick who realized, man, rich people will pay for a more premium ride, and there's black car drivers, and that was his gap that he shot to eventually just transform that industry to what it is now, and like to improve all of our lives. And so, as we were working on this, I knew that I needed distribution from like USA and military.com to get enough buyers in order to get sellers to post. Talked with them, they liked it, and I called them a couple weeks later. And I said, hey, like, what's the timeline if this moves forward? And they go, well, fast for us is 18 months. And par for the course is 2 to 3 years. When I heard that, I mean, it was just crushing.
Right.
I called Kelly Purdue, who's on our board, and I said, I don't think that this is going to work. And
too long. Yeah, it's too long of a time.
And the first thing he said to me was chin up, like never tell that to anyone again because they won't write you a check.
Right.
And
we have this conversation. Right.
We're going to get through this. And I'll always love Kelly for that. Now, I mean, we have 2,000 employees now and 500 contractors. And if not for that conversation, I would have not, stayed the course. And so that's what led to like signing the lease and coming down. And then, very quickly, we just realized that we talked to companies and they said, you guys don't have any users and a destination website for military isn't super appealing. But they said if you had the ability to verify that somebody was a member of the military in real time, we would actually build that into our own website, into our checkout cart. Right. And then it was kind of like, well, whoa, like what if we were like PayPal, for identity? So, and then the federal government came out with this national strategy for trust identities in cyberspace in 2011 and said it doesn't really make sense for Americans to have to create a new login at every government agency, and it's a credit bureau behind the scenes that they're paying over and over again. So like you go to Social Security, create a login, they pay Equifax. You go to IRS, create a login, they pay Equifax. Like you go another one, you create a login, they pay Equifax. And it's like, why don't we just verify them once?
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, and let their verified identity move with them. And so I was like, well, that's what I'm trying to do for military families to prove who they are. And these brands said, it's not just military that we try to verify. We need to verify if folks are students, if they're teachers, if they're influencers on social media, at Home Depot and Lowe's, if they're professional contractors. And I was like,
oh, interesting. So you've even gone verticalized around that. Wow.
And so it was like the concept of digital wallets, like folks are always focused on like payments, right? But a digital wallet, if you think about what's the ID card that you would least like to lose, probably your driver's license or your passport.
Definitely.
Because your driver's license allows you to go to a bank and say, hey, I lost my credit card and debit card. Could I get it back? It authenticates all the other cards in there. And so it was like, whoa, if we can create this secure login, which is the wallet, we allow people to prove that they're military or a teacher or their legal identity, then they can control their own identity and we can streamline the process of login and identity verification across all the IDs that you have in your wallet. Right. In the same way that Visa streamlined payments, and to make it faster and easier for everybody. And so that, once I kind of saw that,
there's a seam. Like, we're going for it.
There it was. It was like military is where we enter. We can get to a bunch of brands. And today, Apple and Samsung and Bose are customers and Veterans Affairs. And then when we got to VA is the largest healthcare organization in the country. So now 127,000 healthcare providers of 938,000 active physicians use us every day, prescribe controlled substances to help fight the opioid crisis because those manual pads are too vulnerable to theft. And so we just kind of kept surfacing the adjacencies. And so now you could be who you are. And then we also know that you're a doctor. So for a healthcare app, that can be really important to be like, this is a patient. Whereas like this is a doctor, we don't see what happens in the app. Right. They now know this is a doctor and so
legitimate doctor. Yeah, right.
Supposed to see.
There's real identity there. You figured it out. So I'm curious. So this is something that came up years ago. I used to be at AOL where I worked on AIM, which dates me. I'm actually a lot younger. But if you remember AOL, it was does anybody remember AOL? Okay, a couple people. Good.
My handle for that, by the way, is Crazy Arms Man from the Adam Sandler.
That's pretty funny. But what I was getting at is back in the day, we were working on authentication, and companies like AOL, which like doesn't exist anymore, and Google went in there, OpenAuth. Like you had all these different players going in to try to do exactly what you're trying to do and create online identity. And this is 2007, 2006 timeframe. And here we are. I don't do math well, but that's like 15 years or so. And more or less, now you're doing it. Yeah. How do you stay pure? Because a lot of those companies, like Google does it, that you can sign in with Google or Facebook and all that, and it's gotten a little bit messy because of their backings and their paths that they've gone into the metaverse or whatever they're doing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. No, I mean across the years, Microsoft was the first one to try to do this. Right. Microsoft Passport, that initiative failed. Right. I think my favorite, or like maybe some Schadenfreude there, but the telecoms tried to do this with the mobile wallet. It was called ISIS, which
no way, worst name ever.
Has to be the worst day in a brand market. Like,
not sure why that failed, but
come on, ISIL, and then like, oh God, no,
God, that's hilarious.
So and then that failed, and they sold it. And when
ISIS. No, I'm kidding. No, hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah.
American Express. So not ISIS. And then And then Verizon had a program called Universal ID, and then they folded, and Symantec had one called Norton ID. And
that's what I'm saying. It's literally just been a revolving door of people saying, we're going to do identity. So I want to know, how are you going to do identity?
And so I think, what I learned along the way is why can't Facebook and Google do this?
Right.
And it's because they're advertising companies. And so there are most portable logins today, but they're not trusted.
Right.
Because they sell your data. Like if we vote online one day in this country, which is maybe the apex of digital identity, God forbid it's Mark Zuckerberg's company that verifies it.
Right.
At the bottom right quadrant, with banks and employers, the problem with those is that they view your identity as a moat. Jamie Dimon doesn't want your identity to help you open up a fintech account with SoFi, right? That lowers switching costs for his customers. Like he's got branded branches that cost a ton of money to maintain. Last thing he wants to do is have you have control of your identity and defect to rival switching costs. Identity literally keeps people locked in his ecosystem.
Right.
Employers view your data as theirs. You leave your account, you leave your work, and it gets shut down, whether it's Okta or Ping or ForgeRock, whatever, it's their data. And so as we looked at it, we go, well, portable logins aren't trusted and trusted logins aren't portable. And the reason why people don't trust the logins that are portable is because there's something wrong with their business. They're Facebook is a massive app that has all of your messaging data and behavioral data, and images. And then when they come down and start to track you, it's really creepy. We call that a voyeur state. And then if a principle like V says that your identity utility should be neutral, you can't compete with other folks. So Amazon has tried to do Amazon Pay and some other stuff, but would Walmart or Target ever?
Never.
Yeah, never. And so you're so as I kept looking at them, the beauty of our model is that we are purely neutral and we only want to do identity and credentials.
That's it.
Which are often already public. Like your professional certifications are listed on state licensing databases. You could FOIA my military service. What we do is just verify that you are in fact you. But we don't play at the app layer, either digital or physical. So China's fused all three together. China does biometric surveillance of your in-person activity.
Wow.
WeChat and Tencent are also the identity layers. When you fuse all three together, you're a surveillance state. In an American model, we said, well, look, we want to be the wallet, the very thin layer of identity for credentials. But we never want to track your behavioral data. So if you had our logs, it would be like Blake Hall logged into the VA.
That's it.
I'm a veteran.
Okay.
Or I checked into MGM, which uses us for digital room check-in. What you do at MGM?
There's an MGM here? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Where have you been staying? Okay.
There's no lines in Vegas anymore at MGM proper. I smile every time I go in there. It's the worst. We give over 300,000 people an average of 15 minutes of their life back, 4.5 million minutes per month, and they've been able to reduce their front desk staffing. So we're like the easy pass lane instead of toll booth workers for pretty much every workflow. So you don't have to wait in line if you don't want to.
So you also do vaccination stuff too?
We do.
We just started doing that.
Yeah, we're the login in California for the California Department of Public Health, so people can actually get their immunization records in the first place.
Oh wow, that's cool. All right, so interesting. I'm so interested to hear where you started with literally the Craigslist for veterans to be now the identity for everyone. That's pretty amazing to pivot. So thanks. Just a quick story, right? So let's talk about the some of the so Tampa. We're here in Tampa.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us here in
Tampa
area. You just opened an office here, and can you talk a little about that? We love Tampa, so tell us a little more about why and what kind of impetus of that was.
Yeah, I love Tampa too. A lot of my best friends from Vanderbilt freshman year were from Tampa and St. Pete, so I came down here a fair bit. It's very cool to have an office here now. We have 600 employees on Henderson Avenue, and it's become a really nice hub for us.
Great. Is that the only office you have besides DC?
Huh?
Oh wow. And when did that happen?
I don't even know. It's been a blur. I think it happened last summer. Is when we had been in the works for a while, but I think that's when we actually formally opened the office.
Okay.
And then of course we have a lot of folks that just work remotely and are all across the country.
Right. So actually, that was my next question, was about culture. So we just had Jen Lim talking about culture, and obviously it's become a thing everywhere, right? Everyone talks about company culture. So I want to hear about how you've been doing company culture with the new office, and obviously remote and pandemic and growing like crazy. How does it all work? How do you keep it together?
Love that question, because we've been very methodical about culture. In fact, our last round we raised from Viking and Capital G. And as we talked to various growth equity funds, they said, you guys are the most structured around culture that we have ever seen.
Huge compliment.
Yeah, thanks. And I have to credit Google's research a little bit for it, because they've put a lot about Google's research on work that's out there. And I think Google might be a little bit like Thomas Jefferson in that, like, what they researched and found out is not necessarily like what they do, but we'll leave that aside for a moment. And so what the research shows is that if you want to hire an effective employee, there are 3 categories that lead to a successful hire. Cognitive ability, which is like how quickly do you learn. It has a 26% R squared to future performance. Skills test has a 29% R squared to successful performance. And then a structured interview has a 26% R squared to successful performance. So essentially, if you evaluate those 3 things against the job you're hiring for, you can get to an 81% chance of a successful hire. Whereas an unstructured interview, which is what I was doing in the early days, and even when I was a scout platoon leader, I'm like, you're fast and can run for forever, so let's go.
You're in. We need more.
Yeah. Can you shoot?
Really interesting. So structured interview, way better.
Yeah. And so if you're able, the skills part is the hardest, because it's like, how do you evaluate engineers versus
salespeople? That's hard. Yeah.
But cognitive ability is kind of what the NFL does in the combine, which is that, are you Rudy or
right?
Are you Jamar Chase, right? Because there's a big difference between the two. But on the culture side, we defined our culture not by amorphous habit or amorphous values that like Enron had on the wall, like excellence and integrity. We define them as
really.
Yeah, that's what.
That's pretty funny.
Those are the Enron values, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
But we define them as habits that were crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
So our first company value is don't be a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And what we mean by that is if you cannot control your fight or flight, if you're a narcissist who needs to inflate your protection around your ego by putting other people down, if you make them scared to come to work,
right,
you're not welcome here. So that's the very first value that we have. Our second value is always compete. We look for a weird track record of competitiveness. Like one of my favorite engineers, if I beat him in Mario Kart on Friday, he would think about it all weekend just to play me on
Monday mornings. There, let's play again. I haven't thought. It's just because you're right here.
Yeah,
why not?
That's exactly what would happen, and I loved it. Weirdly competitive about everything. And if you think about one other value that I'll talk about is treat each customer like your favorite family member. And what it's really about is empathy. And if you're in an interview and you have a question that's, tell me about a time when you did something for someone else when it didn't benefit you to do that at all. If you don't have empathy, you have 0 examples. But people who practice empathy and kindness will have all sorts of examples. And so I took a lot of first round review questions that were the favorite questions, of interviewers that were out there. And then I structured them under all of our cultural values. I created 3 interview tracks with a clear rubric for scoring so that we would have a consistent score against our culture. And now the feedback to me at 2,000 employees is I have yet to meet somebody at ID.me who is not kind. I've yet to meet a jerk. People go out of their way even when they're busy to spend time with me, to get to know me and to help me get up to speed. I mean, that is like the consistent feedback, and it's the most validating thing as a leader when you have those that feedback coming in. And so my last question, my favorite question is, tell me about a time that something went wrong.
That was going to be my next question, actually. Some mistakes along the way. So you're reading this? You've got amazing sight as well.
There you go. Yeah. Well, so the person who tells you about, my boss was terrible and my coworkers were terrible, like you're about to be their boss. And those are about to be their coworkers, right?
Flip it. Right.
But the person who's like, the environment wasn't maybe the best, but like for what I could control, here's what I learned. We want learners and not blamers. So that's under the value of own your mistakes so you can learn from them. Somebody who consistently blames other people for their failures and the team's lack of success, they create toxic locker rooms and toxic office environment. When you find a team that when something goes wrong, they go, I could have done this better. And everyone, Jocko Willink actually talks a lot about that too. It is phenomenal to lead a team that is committed to learning, because that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's about learning at an individual level. And if you want a company that learns at an institutional level, you have to screen for learners and not blamers.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk about you a little bit more. How do you fuel the success of this? It seems like a rocket ship here. Personally, what do you do, to keep it up and keep it going? It's a lot.
Coffee. I've got 3 kids now.
I know, that's what I mean. There's a lot going on. Yeah.
There's a lot going on. I've consistently fired myself from tasks that weren't critical, at that moment. So I'm very blessed. Like our VP of engineering, Alexi, ran Google's login teams and their advanced account protection program. Stephen Benedict ran personalization and AI and ML at Amazon. Anand Mehta, our chief people officer, was Ray Dalio's guy for people and talent for 10 years. And like, I am humbled to have, and so right now, like we're at IRS and there's obviously all sorts of questions about what is ID.me and why are these steps there. My job as a CEO is to focus on PR and comms to make sure that people understand context within which we operate and why this is relevant. And even right now, the New York Times doing a story, Washington Post, Wired, like all this, like right now.
Yep.
And so really, like you only have so much time in a day, and it seems like the time gets shorter. But you have to find great people who have skills where they're stronger than you, and say, hey, pass the baton. And then what I really do is I focus a lot on alignment. So every Sunday, everyone writes an update to me each morning. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to write about what they're working on and just updates and tasks. That way, everyone in the Slack channel can see what everyone else is working on. I read all of them, and then I write a summary back to them, which is my synthesis of what I read and what I think the priorities are. We meet on Monday morning as an exec team. Friday, we do a founders town hall every week with the whole company still on Zoom at 4:00 for 30 minutes, or at 3:30 rather, for 30 minutes, and then we have a ops meeting every 2 weeks, and those rituals and things, they keep everyone aligned. Like I am transparent to a fault because I want everyone to have enough information to do their job, and I know how depressing and demoralizing that can be if you're a soldier carrying a 75-pound ruck through mountain phase of Ranger School and you're on this death march that you have no idea when it ends. When somebody comes along and is like, hey, we have one click left to go, it's going to be about another hour and then we're good, you're like, oh thank God. So like
information is key.
Not knowing where the finish line is just crushes the human psyche, and so so I've tried to take a lot of those lessons with me.
It's great. It sounds very like the process you've set up for your team is very important. Did you set that up, or were there others that helped get that going and keeping it like running?
That part of it was me. I think that's the founder's job. Whoever's in the CEO seat is get the big ideas right. I mean, you have 3 jobs. 1, never run out of money.
We're going to talk about that next.
Yeah, because at the beginning, you don't have the big ideas right. So never run out of money. 2, get the big ideas right. 3, recruit and retain and align terrific people. And that's really your 3 jobs as CEO.
We talked about the last 2. Let's talk about the money real quick. I know we're almost at end of time here, but we're standing between us and happy hour, or everyone in happy hour. So let's talk about the money side of it, because you've done a great job doing that. And I know that we don't need to go through it all, but more or less, what would you share with any startup founders here, anybody in the stream here listening that is out there thinking about this and thinking about getting their pickup truck and pulling a U-Haul down to whatever area and getting it going with the first check or whatever?
The first thing is find people with great character. Like I'm so pumped that you and Jen are doing a fund because you are authentic and like genuinely a good person. I count myself so grateful that our early board members just were always in my corner. They're the type of board members that will pick you up when you're low and will pop that ego a little bit when you get too high. If you find fair weather friends as investors, that's really rough because then they're correlated. Like when they're down, they kick you. When you're up, and it's like, where were you at? Like when I needed you in the dark days, right? So I think focusing on, again, like culture, focusing on people who really get your vision, really get it. We always raised on clean terms, so never did anything like participating preferred or weird liquidation preferences. Never do that. It will bury your common stock, and as you're trying to incentivize people, it'll just crush your cap table. So I always would rather take a lower valuation on clean terms.
Like
that's where
standardized term, like what people are used to. So you're not doing some weird thing and then later someone comes and like, well, they can't do this because of this crazy term, right?
That's right. So if you're like fixated on, I want to get to a $20 million valuation, and then the VC goes, well, I'll give you a $20 million valuation, but I want a 3x liquidation prep.
Right. That's done. You're done.
Yeah. Because like they don't really think they're worth 20 million. They're just locking in the floor for their return.
Right.
And then the next investor who sees it will go, well, you gave them a 3x.
I want 6.
Now,
Like,
yeah. Or it just gets bigger either way, right? 'Cause if
Exactly.
you raise $20 million, well, now the 3x liquidation pref is $60 million.
Right.
So now you've got like $75 million buried under liquidation prefs. If you sell for $80 million, only $5 million goes to the founders and the employees, right? So
You're burying yourself. Yeah.
that's the thing, that if you make that mistake once, maybe you can unwind it in the very early days if your investor realizes it's a Pyrrhic victory, because it will crush the incentives of the company, but maybe not. So like avoid that one like the plague.
That's great advice. Great advice. So I guess in that situation, a lot of times it's out of desperation and feeling like they're in a position that they have to take the terms because maybe they've run out of money, or maybe they didn't think of any other options. So how would you advise those companies if they came to you and like you were in that position or they were in that position?
I think I read though that like even WhatsApp, who is like Sequoia, got like a 3x liquidation pref even on that deal. So sometimes I think it's just like not even knowing what the terms are, or it could just be vanity, because you really want to tell people that I was valued at this number, not realizing that there's a reason why these gimlet-eyed folks like are doing what they're doing. And so you really have to have a great mentor to steer you through that stuff, and even to have a hard conversation if they want to invest. And it's like, well, look, like I know that you actually don't believe in this valuation if this term is here. So what's the real valuation on the company? Because
you'd rather take that.
Your job again is to align everybody, investors, employees. And if you go, look, if I take this, then our incentives are misaligned at key moments, right? Like if the company's worth 60 million and the investors have 75 million worth of pref, and I know that we can't really grow much more than that. How motivated is the management team and the employees to work at that point? You're all employees to like the folks who've got it. You never want to end up sideways with your investors. And so a really good entrepreneur would be like, let's talk about removing this term and what the real valuation that you have on it, and just being honest about that stuff will really help you.
That's a great advice, because you can walk it back most cases if you have that honest conversation. And if they run, it's not meant to be. It's
got
like
super lucky. You just avoided like the bunny boiler equivalent, like fatal attraction or whatever. So.
Absolutely. All right. Just one more final thought before we leave. I know we're a little over here. So anything else you wanted to share before we head out?
If the idea matters, just never give up. Like if you're really good at learning, and that was my attitude too, is that you'll just fund me for long enough, I will eventually figure out a big enough opportunity. And the last thing I'll leave you with, when we were making our pivot from TroopSwap, to this identity utility, I went up on a train to New York City to Andy Dunn's apartment, and he is the founder of Bonobos. And the folks there were amazing, like Andy Ratcliffe, who's a Hall of Fame investor from Benchmark, and he founded Wealthfront, and he lectures at Stanford, GSB. He was giving a talk, but it was the Warby Parker founders, the Venmo founders, were all in this room. And during a break, I talked to one of the Warby Parker guys, and he looks at me and he goes, "Is this your first startup?" I go, "Yep." He's like, "How much you raise?" At the time, it was like $3 million. And he goes, "Don't fuck it up. Big stigma." and so that conversation on the train ride back down, I was like, look, we had some money left, but I knew the business model wouldn't work. I could look at the churn numbers, and I saw the unit economics were not sustainable. And I'm like, if we just continue to do what we do, we will eventually run out of money, and everyone will go their separate ways, and it'll have been a waste of everyone's time and a loss of capital. And I was like, if this is my one shot, I'm going to go for it. Like, I'm going to follow what I know to be true in the bigger opportunity. And so that next Monday, when I got back with the team, I'm like, look, this is what the market is telling us. Everyone wants verification. They don't really care about like our demand gen capabilities. And so we need to build PayPal for identity, because, and that's what we focused on. And then when we went live with Under Armour and like a pilot with the VA and Telluride, we signed up 48,000 users in the first 45 days.
Wow.
And it's the best feeling. That's true product market fit. But man, it sounds easy now, but it took balls like to do that. And it was really stressful and hard, but that's what entrepreneurship is all about. It's what I think Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz talk about. It's having strong opinions that are weakly held. As soon as you invalidate key assumptions that were essential to your plan, just like when I was in Iraq and like no plan survives first contact with the enemy, you just got ambushed. You don't pretend like you didn't get ambushed.
Right.
And that's what's crazy about some startups.
Right.
Like
They're in
you're
denial.
so like, or you're so tied to it, or it's like, no, guys, like we just got blown up, and like we need to react to it. And then if you're just honest with it, it can be rough. But man, coming through the other side and like carving out something where these credit bureaus and data brokers realize they can't even compete with us, and we're ripping apart $42 billion organizations that have been the subject of class action suits, and it's awesome. So like, just keep learning and be brave when you need to be brave and have courage, but also be humble and listen and make sure that that like the things that are core to you, that you're being honest with yourself about whether you've proved them or not. And if you haven't, you gotta dodge and weave.
Thank you so much, Blake Hall. Appreciate you being here.
Great stuff. Thank you to Blake, who has been a longtime member of the Startup of the Year community. It's always very interesting to hear some of those stories and to find out what path a startup navigated to get to where it is today. We also want to, again, mention that we live streamed the entire summit. So if you could not attend in person, make sure to go back and watch it on the YouTube channel at soty.link/ESTYouTube. All right, now I want to go ahead and spread the word again about one of our partners, Open Grants, because we think that some of our listeners could take a lot of value out of the services they provide. The Open Grants platform is a search engine and expert marketplace that unlocks non-dilutive U.S. funding for organizations around the world, empowering startups, nonprofits, grant writers, foundations, and government agencies to participate in a new paradigm of funding, which is a pretty great resource. And we have a special offer for our listeners today. You can all go ahead and sign up for free and search grants at opengrants.io/established. Again, that's opengrants.io/established. And for all you listeners out there, if you enjoyed the conversation and interview today, please do share it with someone that you think will find it helpful. Well, that's it for our episode today. Remember, if you have a startup idea or want to get something going, today is the best day to get things rolling. And in doing so, we encourage you to join our community for access to the support, expert advice, and resources you need to elevate your startup by going to soty.link/apply. Until next time, I'm John Gaidos. We'll see you here again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode soon.